Hello, welcome to episode 8 of Sussex Sport Weekly. I'm Matt Poll, and this week I'm joined by Brighton and Hove Albion writers Derren Howard and Frankie Elliott, and the returning Mark Dunford, who will give us all the latest from Crawley Town. It's been a brilliant week for Brighton. Both the men's and women's teams were victorious in the quarterfinals of their respective FA Cups, and now have semi-finals to look forward to next month. The ladies got the ball rolling, scoring twice in 4 first-half minutes to secure a 2-0 win at Birmingham City and a place in the final 4 of the Women's FA Cup for the first time since 2020. The men then made short work of this year's giant killers Grimsby, thumping the League Two club 5-0 at the Amex to book their place in the FA Cup semis for the first time since 2019. Both teams will face Manchester United in the semis. The women face United on the weekend of April 15th, while the men take on the Red Devils at Wembley a week later. We'll look ahead to the 2 semi-final fixtures and reflect on Albion's season so far. Meanwhile, Crawley helped pull themselves out of the League Two danger zone, courtesy of a 4-point week. The Reds picked up a 1-0 win at AFC Wimbledon on Saturday before claiming a point in a 1-1 home draw against Doncaster Rovers in midweek. Crawley are now 2 points clear of second from bottom Hartlepool going into this Saturday's huge home game against basement club Rochdale. We'll look ahead to that game and also assess the Reds' recent revival under Scott Lindsay. But first, we'll start with Brighton men's win over Grimsby. Albion was suitably stylish in victory and probably should have netted more than 5. But all in all, it was a great afternoon's work, wasn't it, Derren?
Yeah, it couldn't have gone any better, to be honest. It was very comfortable in the end. And, Grimsby, they tried hard. They had a full, they sold all their allocation of tickets for their fans and they packed out the away end. But they just never really got going. They never really got into the match. Brighton were dominant, to be honest. They kept the ball really well, as they have done recently in the Premier League. And when they play that way, it's hard for Premier League teams to deal with. So for a League Two team, they really came up against it. Their manager, Paul Hurst, said beforehand that they showed them a video of Brighton playing prior to the match. And he said it was like an 18 rated certificate for the players, because it's just so tough to watch and it was quite hard to deal with. And it proved that way, to be honest, on the day. And yeah, every decision that De Zerbi makes at the moment seems to be paying off. It was an attacking lineup. Dennis Undav was recalled to the starting lineup, and he opened the scoring. Then the brilliant Evan Ferguson, he took over after that. He got 2 good goals. Solly March, and then that was a great header actually, Solly March's goal, and then a goal from Atoma. So yeah, now there's just a small matter of playing United at Wembley Stadium to look forward to. So yeah, it's really good. 7th in the league, FA Cup semi-final. Great times for Brighton.
Well, Albion very nearly gave Grimsby away back into the game when Robert Sanchez appeared to pick up the ball outside his area under pressure. Ultimately, a VAR check concluded that the ball was just on the line when he did so. But does this moment show why De Zerbi has made Jason Steele Brighton's first choice goalkeeper, Frankie?
Yeah, it's always very difficult, I think, for a goalkeeper when they are recalled after being dropped, especially number one goalkeepers like Sanchez was, because your next performance is scrutinised. No one is going to remember the fact that he kept a clean sheet, or the fact that in the second half he made a number of very, very good saves to keep that clean sheet, albeit with the game done and dusted. His performance will be remembered for the fact that 1-0. He nearly gave Grimsby away back into the game with some sloppy goalkeeping. That is the way it is going for him right now. That is obviously why De Zerbi has dropped him out of the team. But I still believe that this is a testament to Steele's performances rather than any decline in Sanchez's form. I still think Sanchez was playing very well in this Brighton side. He'd performed very well in a number of games and some big wins this season especially under De Zerbi. I still believe that if Steele had not played as well as he had done in the FA Cup games, Sanchez wouldn't have been dropped. This is the way it has been going. It's more the fact that when Steele has played, he has been exceptional. As we've seen in the Crystal Palace game, not only has his distribution been fantastic, he made some really, really key saves over the game at 0-0 to keep Brighton in the game when they didn't play as well as they had done in previous weeks. Sanchez is still very, very young. He has always had that in him, I think, since he's been a Brighton goalkeeper. There is, the occasional dropped cross and the occasional mistake with the ball at his feet. But that comes with being a young goalkeeper. I think if he, hopefully, because you never know with someone who is a Spanish international and has a lot of high hopes of playing a top level football. I hope he stays around at Brighton for a long time, because they have a goalkeeper there that can be their top goalkeeper for years and years to come. As I say, as a young man, he could be Brighton's keeper for the next 10, 11 years. But right now, this is Jason Steele's time. A keeper that has not played a lot of first team football before coming to Brighton and has not played much first team football at Brighton at all. He has taken his opportunity this year and he has excelled. So this is still the Jason Steele moment rather than the end of Sanchez or a worrying decline in Sanchez's form.
Well, speaking of players that Brighton would like to stick around for a while, it was a week to remember for young Evan Ferguson. The teenager was at the double against Grimsby, as Derren mentioned, and his 2 goals against the Mariners took him to 6 in 13 appearances for this season. He then followed that up with a goal on his Republic of Ireland debut in their 3-2 friendly win over Latvia last night. His goal made him the Republic of Ireland's youngest goal scorer since legendary forward Robbie Keane in 1998. The boy can do no wrong at the moment, can he, Derren? What attributes does Ferguson have that makes him such an exciting young forward?
Yeah, it's quite incredible, really. 18 years of age, and he just seems to take it, and he doesn't seem phased by anything at the moment. I think that's been the most impressive attribute that he's got, is his sort of calmness about it all. Really, he's not getting carried away with the hype. He just seems this sort of chap that just gets his head down, focuses on his football, and he won't be just distracted by all of the comments that are going on around him. And he's been praised, by everybody this week, and scoring on the main match on BBC, sort of prime time or match of the day. It's increased his profile. He's now, as you say, he scored for the Republic of Ireland in midweek, and without wanting to sort of add further pressure to him, I think he's brilliant. I think he'll be the best striker Albion have had and Ireland have had in many years, and he's going to save the club millions. I think he just seems, he's a humble, sort of down to earth character, and he showed his class. His first goal was, in particular, I thought it was excellent. His first touch really showed what he's all about. With the ball was sort of played into him from McAllister, and how he brought it down with his first touch, and then had the composure to finish it as well. He looks the real deal. Yeah.
Well, Derren mentioned there that he's been roundly praised for the season that he's had. Following the win over Grimsby, BBC pundit Danny Murphy said Ferguson was a superstar. While in an interview in the Irish Post before Ireland's win over Latvia, ex-Man City and Republic of Ireland midfielder Stephen Ireland compared Ferguson to legendary Bayern Munich and Poland striker Robert Lewandowski. Ferguson has no doubt been fantastic since breaking into the first team squad. But is there a danger people maybe putting too much pressure on him and expecting too much with these kind of statements, Frankie?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was speaking to one of my friends the other day who was speaking about Evan Ferguson, and he said, well, he hasn't actually scored that many goals this season, in reference to the 7 goals he scored. And this is the sort of era we live in, of sort of the post-Messi and Ronaldo era of the sort of 50, 60, 70 plus goals a year they used to get. And also the sort of Mbappe-Haaland era we've just had, where teenagers were coming onto the scene at Champions League level and scoring 25, ridiculous numbers in their opening first season as a professional footballer. What Evan Ferguson is doing is still amazing. It's not of that ceiling, which is obviously crazy. But to score 7 goals already, we still haven't finished the season at 18, and his first real, I know he made appearances before, but his first real run of games, starting games in the first team, to come in and play so well and score those goals, like Derren alluded to, the quality of the goals he's scored as well, it's just been fantastic. And therefore the praise and the attention that gets is obviously going to be high, and it's rightly so, because I think the most impressive thing is when you think of young players, especially at 18, 19, you think of players that are wanting to take their opportunities, and they are, chomping at the bit to make an impression, very quick, very dynamic, but physically might be overpowered, especially as a striker against Premier League centre-backs who are looking to physically dominate you. Evan Ferguson's physical stature makes him look like he's 6, 7 years older than he is. He's already physically ready and dominating players who are much older than him and have much more experience. So, there's a player there that's readily built for the Premier League, but The key thing is he's a very grounded person, so I don't think he will get to his head. But the key thing is managing the hype. And I think in a club like Brighton, with a manager like De Zerbi, they're very well aware they cannot rely on Ferguson as their sole striker for the next 2-3 years as this development period goes on. I think playing alongside Danny Welbeck is the perfect recipe for Ferguson's development. Having someone who's so experienced and has played Champions League football, international football, guiding him through those early years is a fantastic way to come into Premier League football. I think De Zerbi is also a great manager to have in making sure that Ferguson, is not thrust into the limelight and sort of left there to be Brighton's main man for these next 2 years. Because I remember Guardiola saying very interesting about young players that you obviously see this great rise from when they first burst onto the scene, but as with every player, there is that dip. And the key thing is for great managers, is to make sure that dip does not become a problem, because those dips are important into the player becoming great players for their prime. So there will be a period, whenever that may be, maybe next year, maybe in 2 seasons' time, where Ferguson will go through 6-7 months without scoring a goal. That's just, that's part of being a striker, a young striker. What is important is that Brighton are not in a situation where they are reliant on him, or are in a terrible situation where he is their only striker. They haven't replaced Danny Welbeck, or they haven't looked at giving other options rather than just Ferguson. And it's important they manage that situation well, because if they do, they've got a striker there that could be a great striker for them in years to come, and B, someone they can set their next 60-70 million pound player, which is obviously for a club of Brighton size hugely important.
Well, the Premier League will now pause until the 1st of April due to the international break. England visit Italy this evening for a Euro 2020 qualifier, but will do so without informed Brighton pair Lewis Dunk and Solly March. Both of them missed out on Southgate's squad, with the former Villa and Middlesbrough defender preferring to pick the majority of players that starred for the 3 Lions of the World Cup in Qatar. Do Dunk and March have every right to feel aggrieved not getting selected, Derren? And Dunk especially, particularly considering Southgate picked Harry Maguire, who's barely featured for United under Erik ten Hag.
Yeah, I think he should, Matt. I think he should feel aggrieved, but I don't think he'll be surprised in the least, unfortunately. And nor will a number of Brighton fans either. But if you look at the consistency of Dunk's performances over the last few seasons, he's outperformed the likes of Eric Dyer, Connor Cody, Tyrone Mings, Michael Keane, and Harry Maguire, really, all of whom have been selected, and some continue to be selected ahead of him. But yeah, if you'd ask any Brighton fan, that they would take Lewis Dunk ahead of those names, any day of the week. But yeah, it seems though Southgate, he has his favourites though, and to be fair, to a certain extent, you have to credit Harry Maguire. He went into the last World Cup under such scrutiny. Every touch, every pass, he was under real pressure, and he performed really well in Qatar, actually, when it really mattered in the big tournaments. He's a better player in tournaments than he is in the Premier League. So yeah, can Dunk get ahead of that? I don't think he can. And he should have more. He's had 1 cap so far under Southgate, and absolutely he should have more. If he was 25, if he had an extra yard of pace, then he'd probably be in. But unfortunately, Southgate seems to have made his decision, and his stance is pretty clear on Lewis Dunk.
Are people remotely excited about England's qualifiers against Italy and Ukraine out of interest?
Didn't even know it was on tonight. Apologies.
No, yeah, I think that sums it up. It's one of those, isn't it? I think the Premier League is such a, it gets all the eyes and gets all of the focus, and I think some people almost sort of, when there's no Premier League on and the FA Cup, people sometimes sort of just take a back seat almost, and may turn it on as in a passing interest, especially if it's not one of the big games. But I think Southgate would argue that it's important to continue the progress, and as they look towards the next qualifiers and the next tournaments, that it's it's a crucial game in terms of the team's development. So from his point of view, from there, but in the general, the wider public, probably not.
Can we use his full name, please? Crawley's favourite son, Gareth Southgate.
Gareth Southgate.
I was talking to Steve Bone, friend of this podcast, and we were just saying it's hard to get excited about an international football match on a Thursday night, isn't it? It's just weird to have it on a Thursday, and yeah, they just play it every day of the week during international break, and it just doesn't quite hold the same weight as it used to. I don't think.
It's also
sorry, Frankie. I was going to ask you.
Sorry.
That's all right. No worries. I was going to say, even the prospect of England playing Italy, does that not get the pulse racing?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it from solely the England games, they're hugely important games. These are the first qualifying games for Euro 2024. They're playing two sides that made it to the last Euros. They made it to the last Euros and the winners of the last Euros. So they're difficult games and important games, but for a football fan, they fall in the middle. They're like right in the run-in of the season, where fans are most excited about promotion, relegation, cup victories. You know, for Brighton fans going to Wembley, for fans of top six clubs, European quarterfinals, and they're getting all excited for this. And it's coming towards the end, and they've got these two games that just don't fit in with that sort of mindset. So, as much as they are important for England, for the fans of football, they mean nothing, and it's just come at the wrong time. There's always this March international break. It's just when things are starting to get really exciting. But it seems to be there's a big game every Wednesday and Saturday, and then you've got these games that feel that don't live up to the same weight of expectation.
Well, Mr. Infantino, the people have spoken. Going back on track, Brighton ladies booked their spot in the semi-finals after their victory at St Andrews. Birmingham with the better of the game, hitting the woodwork 5 times, but Albion just punished 2 mistakes. And now, as mentioned, they will play United in the semi-finals. This FA Cup run has been a bright spark in what has been quite a difficult Women's Super League season for the Seagulls, hasn't it, Frankie?
Yeah, it has, and it's been important. It's been important because it's been a difficult season. I think Brighton have done really well in the last 5 years, being in the WSL and building on year by year some great work from Hope Powell and also the people above her to make sure that they have cemented themselves and continue to cement themselves as a top women's team in this country. This season it hasn't worked. There's been many issues going on at the club. Hope Powell obviously resigning was a big issue, and then her replacement Jen Scheuer, that didn't work at all. 67 days he was in the post. So there's been a lot of issues with the running of the club from that level. They are now in a relegation fight. There's no doubt about that, with the Reading and Leicester around them. It's going to be a very difficult end to the season. But the employment of Amy Merricks, who has been at the club for the last 8 years, I think is a good one. In her first game, they lost 2-1 to Manchester City, who are going for the title. They were very unlucky to lose that, lost that in the last minute. And she said after the game that was a turning point. Although they lost, it was very much a turning point for their season due to the performance. I thought last week was very impressive. They're playing a very good Birmingham side, although they are in the Championship. A lot of WSL experience in that side. And to come away, they had to ride their luck, obviously hitting the woodwork so many times, but a professional performance, a clean sheet, and an FA Cup semi-final, which can do, especially for a team down the bottom, that can do you wonders because you've got something to play for still. Obviously, you've got the threat of relegation, which is a nerve-wracking experience, but the FA Cup can feel like the weight off your shoulders. You're playing a Manchester United team who are, odds-on favourites. You go in there nothing to lose. And everything to gain. And obviously, there's places to play for, your shirts to fight for that game that you want to play, and an opportunity, if you win, to play at Wembley. So they have a massive game against Reading this Saturday, who are their relegation rivals away. I think coming off the back of last week's result and the performance against City, if they can build on that with some good form going into the semi-final in a couple of weeks' time, going up and playing against Manchester United, they've got every chance. But that being said, Manchester United are a very, very good side, a top side. Lots of great players in that side. From the England's Women's Euros, Nikita Paris, Ella Toone, and the striker Russo, all were main players in that title-winning side, and they've been a major players this season as well, and helping United to be second in the league and still very much going for the WSL title. So it's a very, very difficult game. But like I say, it's been a massively important part of Brighton's season, which I hope under Amy Merricks for the rest of the season, they can turn around and keep their WSL status and even, possibly get to a final. But I think the more important thing is getting to that semi-final, because it could be the turning point, as Merricks has said, to saving them what has been a very, very difficult season.
Well, they're both tough draws for the men's and women's teams in the FA Cup. But who do you think has got the better chance of advancing and why? Starting with you, Derren.
I think they both have a great chance. They can both go into the game with confidence, and it'd be a great double, wouldn't it, if they could both get to Wembley this season? And as Frankie said, the women are just 1 point off the bottom in the WSL, and they've struggled this season. The appointment of Jens Schoer, it was just a bit of a disaster, really. He sort of came in and the best thing that came out of it is they realised it was a problem straight away, and he had 6 games in charge, and they sort of said, look, this isn't working. Let's look, and Amy Merrick seems to be a breath of fresh air. She should probably have got the job after Hope Powell left, but many people would like to see her be installed as the permanent manager. She is the interim, and she just seems like a breath of fresh air. She just sort of speaks so well. She looks more inspirational than the previous manager, and you could just see that the players would want to play for her, and I think that's what's made the difference. And the FA Cup run could really lift the spirits. They've got Reading this Saturday, which is they're just 1 place and 2 points above them. So if they can leapfrog, then it will be a huge boost going into the 2 Man United games. They play them in the league first at the Broadfield Stadium. April the 1st, I think it is, and then on April the 16th is the FA Cup. So yeah, I think they've got a great chance. It's going to be a huge task, but Lewis caused United trouble in the previous round at the Dripping Pan. So hopefully Albion can go one better and cause a shock, and get to their first ever FA Cup final. Why not?
Of the men's and women's team, Frankie, who do you think has got the better chance of kind of upsetting the apple cart and beating United to make the final?
You've got to go with the men's, and that's true solely for the fact that they have been playing so well. It's going to be a great game. I think obviously we saw in Erik ten Hag's first game, we saw Brighton defeat very much a very put together Manchester United side that wasn't fully formed yet. So it'll be a much more interesting encounter than that first game. But also Brighton have changed dramatically since then. Of course, Graham Potter was in charge for that game. And now they're under De Zerbi, and they've, many would say they're playing better than they ever were. So it's a fantastic spectacle. But I think one of the most impressive things about Brighton under De Zerbi has been that they don't fear any of the big 6 teams. I think in the past, maybe under Potter and certainly Houghton when they played Man City in that 2019 semi-final, there was a sort of a case like, we're just happy to be here. We're going to sort of shut up shop and hope for the best. Whereas I think De Zerbi will be taking that Brighton side to Wembley. I think, as he said last week about not being tourists, it's like we're going there to outplay them and dominate and win the game in our style with our philosophy of football. So I think that's his bold, we don't fear anyone attitude has really served Brighton well and will serve them well in a big game for a semi-final like against Manchester United. But as much as it's been great for Brighton women to get so far and to play in the semi-final, they are very, very much underdogs for that game. So that's why the Brighton men I see as having more of a chance of getting to Wembley for the final.
Well, the men can reflect on a job well done so far this season going into the international break. They sit 7th points off 4th place Spurs with 3 games in hand. And as mentioned, an FA Cup semi-final trip to Wembley to look forward to. Roberto De Zerbi and Albion have rightfully been praised for their excellent performances and hard work this season. But I want to know what Brighton could have done better this season so far. Derren, starting with you.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think if you're being critical, you'd say it's not killing games off when they're really on top and flying. You look at Palace away, they dropped points there. Fulham at home, then Leeds away, and in each game, Brighton were they were dominating, and they enjoyed huge amounts of possession. They created chances, but they just couldn't put them away. So that's 7 points. In those three matches alone, which would put them on, 49 points, level with Tottenham, and with 3 games in hand. So that's the main thing for me. But overall, you have to say they have been excellent, and you sort of feel the confidence that they have in this style now that they're playing under De Zerbi. It looks as though they're really, locked into that style now, and it's causing teams problems. They're confident with it. And they're a real match for any team in this division, and you'd probably include, like the top teams within that as well. you'd be confident now with Brighton going to face, the big teams at Man United, Manchester City. And the best thing, I think they can still get better as well.
Frankie, being nitpicky, where could Brighton have done a little bit better this season?
Yeah, I have to agree with Derren because we are being very, very picky because Brighton have been so brilliant since especially since after the World Cup, which I think is where you should best judge their season from, because obviously the period before that, De Zerbi was still getting to grips with the job, and then Graham Potter left when they were flying high in 4th place with 4 wins from their first 6 games. So in that period, you have to say they took the lead in the game against Leeds, in the game against Leicester, and the game away at Palace, and they didn't win any of those games, and they should have done. And that's why we're being critical, because they played so well. But to be a top team, to be a team that plays Champions League football regularly, which I'm sure De Zerbi wants, you have to win those games, and you have to kill off those teams that are struggling at the end, lower end of the table, regardless if you're playing home and away. I think that will, we're seeing many chances being created, and these players like Matoma and March getting many more goals and assists than in seasons gone past for wingers. But I think De Zerbi will be looking at that as their main issue, is not how they play against the big sides or how defensively astute they are, because I don't think he has always said that his teams will look to score just more goals in the opposition rather than looking for 1-2-0 wins. If they're going to play like that, they need to take these chances and blow teams away, really, because that's what they can do. They have done. They have all the possession and the stats to show that they have played teams off the park, but they haven't got the 2-0s, the 3-0s, the 3-1s, 4-1s that they should have done in those games.
Well, switching to Crawley Town. Welcome back, Mark Dunford. I think most listeners want to know, how's the injury?
Yeah, it's not too bad. Yeah, the back's recovered. A few massages and I'm fine. Yeah.
Right as rain now. Good to hear. Yes, matters on the field. Crawley Town pulled themselves out of the relegation mire with a win at AFC Wimbledon and a draw with Doncaster. A great points haul from 2 teams above them in the table. But having read your coverage on the Crawley v Doncaster game on sussexworld.co.uk/sportmark, the Reds should probably be celebrating a 6-point week as opposed to a 4-1.
Yeah, absolutely. They were really good on Tuesday. The only place they lacked was up front, and that sort of creating the clear chances. I think they had 8 shots on goal. I think they had on total, but there are only a couple on target. So it was. I don't think we'll know how good a point or how disastrous a point it is until after the Grimsby game on Tuesday, because I said before this a run of 3 home games that 7 points will be a good return. If they win against Rochdale and win against Grimsby, it's a good point against Doncaster. But if they don't pick up wins now in the next 2 games, it doesn't look like a very good point at all. But they should have won. I spoke to Scott Lindsay afterwards, and while we were waiting for the club to come round and start, he said, "What did you think?" And I said, "Well, you'd be disappointed that you haven't got 3 points." And he said, "Yeah, you can't play that well in the position we're in and not get all 3 points." So it was disappointing, but I think it was it was a good performance and something to take into the next 2 games, definitely.
Well, they're now unbeaten in their last 3 League 2 games, which is a distinct contrast to the 6 consecutive losses that plagued the club from February to around mid-March. What's changed since then, Mark? Is it something that Scott Lindsay's instilled in the players? Is it tactical tweaks, or how do you sum it up?
Well, it was funny because me and Sam Morton, we were both at the Sutton game, 2 weeks ago now, 2.5 weeks ago. And it was, in my opinion, one of the worst Crawley performances I've seen. It was, they were never in it. And then after 10 minutes on Tuesday night, Sam Morton was there again with me. And we both said the marked difference was incredible. Just even after 10 minutes, it was so much better. And Sam did ask Scott Lindsay afterwards, what has changed in the last 3 weeks, kind of thing. And from his point of view, he said nothing. He said the only game in that run of 6 where they didn't perform at all well was the Carlisle game when they were 4-0 down at half time and eventually lost 5-2. And he said he doesn't think it's just confidence now. And that win, the win against AFC Wimbledon, getting their first away win is going to obviously instill confidence. But I hadn't seen anything sort of tactically different. I mean, Dion Conroy was back in the centre of defence, which is good because he'd played a couple of games in midfield down to injuries and stuff. And I think Crawley look a better side with Dion Conroy at centre running the centre of defence. Joel Lynch was back. Ben Gladwin was back on Tuesday night, and both of those made a difference. Although Lynch had to go off with an illness, he actually vomited on the pitch on Tuesday night. He just started feeling dizzy. Yeah, so that wasn't good. But yeah, Ben Gladwin being back, he played. What did he play? 60 minutes, and then he was replaced by Raf Khalil, who came on, changed the game, and was outstanding. So I don't think Gladwin wanted to come off, but Crawley fans will be grateful he did it because of the impact Raf Khalil had.
Well, yeah, you've spoken about the positives, but obviously you mentioned there that the goal scoring might be an issue, especially after Doncaster game. Is that an area of concern going into their game against Rochdale?
I think it is still, because Dom Talford, he came with such a fanfare when he signed, and he scored double figures this season, a few from the spot. But when he's up front on his own, he had Remy Ote on the left and Ashley Nadesan on the right on Tuesday night. And they all work really hard, but you just can't help but feel Talford needs a big man next to him so he can run off and that. He works really hard on that, but you just can't see how he's going to create himself a chance, kind of thing. So you need someone there setting him up. But Ashley Nadesan looks good back on form. Now, if you can put Nadesan or Ote up front with Talford as a front two, then maybe that make a difference. But yeah, the way they're playing at the moment with Talford on his own, with the two on the wings, not quite looking like there's going to open up loads of chances. So it's just a case of sort of fine-tuning those front three and how they play them, I think, for Lindsay.
Well, yeah, as mentioned, this Saturday sees Crawley host bottom of the table Rochdale in a huge match at the foot of the table. A win for Crawley would move them 10 points clear of Rochdale, while a loss would move the Lancashire club to within 4 points of Crawley. I know we've said this a number of times, Mark, but is the Rochdale game the definition of a must-win game for Crawley and kind of put the relegation fears to rest a little bit?
I think so, definitely. And a defeat for Rochdale on Saturday will certainly, I think, put another nail into their coffin. But yeah, Rochdale, they're not going to roll over. I mean, they drew 4-4 with Swindon last week in what would look like an amazing game. And they've beaten, I think they beat Crewe or drew with Crewe recently as well. So they're not just going to roll over, but it is a must-win game for Crawley. And I think they will win. But it's just a case, if they don't win, then again, the Doncaster point looks like a poor point rather than 3 points. And then it makes Grimsby even more important, and it just adds more pressure. So I think they will win. It's the second game of their two for £2 games. There's going to be a huge crowd there. It worked against Harrogate, so hopefully it'll work against Rochdale as well.
Well, then on Tuesday, Crawley welcome Grimsby to the Broadfield Stadium. The Mariners sit 15th in the table. They are 14 points clear of relegation and also 14 points off the playoffs. Nothing really for Grimsby to play for, and potentially flagging from their FA Cup exertions. Crawley must surely fancy their chances of a win on Tuesday night. Yeah,
I think so. And I think out of the 3 games, this is their bank of 3 points for Crawley, because I'll probably put a death knell on it now. But like you say, Grimsby got nothing to play for. But it was funny, even though Doncaster can mathematically still get in the playoffs and that, but I was speaking to some of the media guys from Doncaster, and they said before the game, this game means nothing. The rest of the season is nothing to Doncaster now. So, which was quite interesting. And they said, what a disappointing season. And Crawley couldn't go on and beat them. So Grimsby absolutely have nothing to play for. So at that time, they're relaxed and they might go into it just thinking, we've got nothing to lose. We can just go out and express ourselves, and Crawley will have to be wary of that. But because Crawley know they've got to keep picking up points, I think we could be looking at the 6 points over the next 2 games.
Well, before we move on to our score predictions, we'd like to say commiserations and congratulations at the same time to Lewis Women, who fought valiantly in their 3-1 defeat to Man United in the FA Cup quarter-finals on Sunday. United took an early lead through a Rian Cleverly own goal before Vilda Bow reset double their advantage after the break. The Rooks rallied, and Emily Craft pulled a goal back with a fine lofted finish over United and England keeper Mary Earps. But sadly, it wasn't to be for Lewis, as substitute Nikita Parris struck late on to seal the Red Devils' progress. You can read all the thoughts of Rooks manager Scott Booth and goalscorer Emily Craft, as well as United boss Mark Skinner, online at sussexworld.co.uk/sport, and in this week's Sussex Express newspaper, which hits the shelves tomorrow. Score predictions. Crawley Town against Rochdale, starting with Mark. What are you going for?
3-1 Crawley.
Darren, what you got?
Yeah, I'm going to go for a win for Crawley. It seems their momentum has changed a bit as well. I'll go for a 2-0 victory, and Khalil to score as well again.
Frankie, what are you going for?
Yeah, no, they've completely turned around, which is great to see for Crawley. I'm going to go for a 1-0 Crawley win.
And then Crawley Grimsby on Tuesday, Mark.
It'll be a bit tighter, I think, this one, but maybe a 1-0 or 2-1 win for Crawley.
Derren?
Yes, Grimsby probably FA Cup hangover still. They won't want to come back down to Sussex again. So, yeah, we're going to go for a double with Crawley, I think.
And Frankie, what you get?
Yeah, likewise, I think, as you say, Grimsby have had their season-defining moment just last week, and I think it's going to be difficult for them to come back around from that. So it's a 2-1 Crawley win.
I was going to ask about England's games against Italy and Ukraine, but as I know you're both all incredibly excited for it, are we worried about any of a score prediction for those games? Do you want to do it anyway?
I think there'll be 2 goals in both 2 goals in 180 minutes of football. It'll be 1-0 to one side in both games, and it will be dull.
So with that heart-pounding action to look forward to, Derren, what score result are you going for in those 2 games?
Oof. Well, Naples, it could be quite fiery atmosphere down there. So I'd say a 1-1 draw, have a pizza and then come home, I think.
Frankie, what are you going for?
Well, I think this is going to be I think there's a lot of pressure on these 2 games for England because of the criticism that Southgate was faced with the squad selection, this sort of England FC thing that's been following him, and also the fact that there was many pointed at the issues of the World Cup, the fact that Southgate hasn't proved himself against a big team. Obviously, the defeat to France, the lack of substitution. So the Italy game first up, which I know they didn't make it to the World Cup, is still a big side. Away from home, I think he needs a big result. I think he needs a big result because if they're not careful, England, if these 2 games don't go well, they're at danger of making a mess of this Euro qualification. So I think a 0-0 draw would actually go down very well as an important result if they get that at Naples, and then they need to beat a very, very strong Ukraine side. So I'm going to go for a 0-0 and then hopefully a 2-0 win back home at Wembley.
Is it 2 who qualify from the group? So I'm, without meaning to sound arrogant, surely it must be quite difficult for England not qualify to the Euros, you'd think.
Well, you would say that, but you know, like I say, England are not in a good place right now. I have to say, if you look back before the World Cup, the Nations League games, they were not playing very well. They got relegated from that. You know, the France result, although they played well, a lot of criticism at Southgate for the fact that they didn't go for it with the Marcus Rashford not coming on to I think the 85th minute.
Yeah,
the squad issues. A lot of people again. I think the Harry Maguires and the Eric Dyers being picked. It's like I say, it's being arrogant and being English and also being a top side. They should qualify, of course they should, but. We've been here before. Remember Euro 2008, they should have qualified, but you don't win the games against Italy. Those 2 games, you lose 6 points there. You don't beat Ukraine away. There's points dropped there, and all of a sudden it becomes very difficult. In those last 3 or 4 games of qualifying, there's a lot of pressure on them. So, yes, they should qualify, but there's a lot of unknown around Southgate's England at the moment. I have to say.
I think they'll qualify comfortably. I think they turn up in the games when they need to qualify. And I think under Southgate, their record in the qualification group stages has been pretty impressive. So I think they will get the job done.
England going to get the job done, Mark? We're going to assume so.
Yeah, but it won't be pretty.
As long as we're there, that's what counts.
Indeed, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for this week, as ever, chaps. And for the latest sports reports, news, views and pictures from Sussex, make sure to visit sussexworld.co.uk/sport. And we will see you all next week. Thank you very much.